They thought he was worthless, a nobody sweeping floors. But under the harsh lights of the auditorium, one chain slipping from his shirt revealed a truth that could burn down their lives. It was supposed to be a celebration, the annual awards night of Westlake Academy, the most prestigious private school in Houston. Students in pressed uniforms filled the hall. Parents in designer suits and glittering dresses lined the rows, whispering about scholarships, legacies, futures. The Whitmore family, heirs to one of the richest dynasties in Texas, sat in the front row, their name etched into the walls of the building itself. They owned the stage. They owned the school, or so they believed. At the edge of the stage stood Ethan Moore, 24 years old, a gay man who worked as both janitor and music assistant at the academy. He was there because his students, the children he quietly mentored after hours, had insisted he attend. For them, he wasn't just someone who tuned the piano or scrubbed the cafeteria floors. He was the one who stayed late to help them hit the right notes, who listened when no one else did, who reminded them that their voices mattered even when the world told them they did not. But for the elite, his presence was an eyesore. When his name was called, Ethan stepped forward cautiously, the weight of every whisper pressing against him. He wore the same clean shirt he always wore, sleeves neatly pressed. Though he had patched it himself, the applause was scattered, polite at best, until a sharp laugh sliced through the air. Madison Whitmore, the only daughter of the billionaire family, stood tall in her glittering gown. She raised her voice loud enough for the hall to hear. "A janitor gay like you will never stand with us." The words echoed, sharp as a slap. Conversations died instantly. 100 heads turned toward Ethan. Some eyes darted away with pity, others with cruel delight. Even the youngest students froze in confusion. The microphone screeched softly, amplifying the silence that followed. Ethan's hands trembled as he bent to pick up the folder he had dropped. The room spun with humiliation, yet his back remained straight. But as he reached down, something slipped from the pocket of his shirt. A dull clink, it hit the floor. A simple dog tag, worn with time, brought it across the polished stage until it rested in the light. Gasps rippled through the front row. Brandon Whitmore's face paled. Michael Whitmore's jaw tightened. Ryan Whitmore leaned forward, eyes wide with disbelief, because they recognized it. That tag was not just a piece of metal. It was the very same kind carried by the man who had once dragged them through smoke and flames, out of a house fire that had nearly claimed their lives 18 years earlier. For the first time, the mighty Whitmore heirs stared at Ethan not with disdain, but with the haunting memory of a figure they could never forget. The image of a firefighter carrying them one by one through a collapsing building, wrapped in courage, seared into their past. And now that man's son stood before them. The janitor they mocked, the gay man their sister humiliated. The hall did not know what to do with the silence that followed. Madison folded her arms, oblivious to the shift in her brother's expressions. But for Ethan, every eye on him felt like a stone pressing deeper into his chest. He bent down, fingers trembling, and picked up the dog tag as if lifting a piece of his father's soul back into his heart. The night that began as public humiliation had already planted the seed of revelation. They thought he was worthless, but that chain around his neck carried the weight of sacrifice, a truth waiting to tear down the walls of arrogance and lies. In moments like these, the world shows its cruelty, but also its cracks where light can seep through. Ethan didn't know yet what storm was about to come, but one thing was certain. His father's legacy had just stepped back into the room. If this story moves you, if you believe courage can rise from the places the world mocks, follow HeartStories, because stories like Ethan's remind us dignity may be bruised, but it cannot be erased. Long before Ethan Moore carried his father's dog tag, there was a night that carved itself into Houston's history. Smoke had swallowed the Whitmore estate, flames tearing through beams and glass, with a hunger that showed no mercy. Inside, 3 frightened boys, Brandon, Michael, and Ryan, were trapped behind walls that screamed with fire. It was Daniel Moore, a firefighter with steady hands and a heart larger than his own body, who broke through the inferno. He carried them out one by one, chest heaving, lungs scorched. When the last child was safe, he turned back toward the collapsing stairwell, as if the blaze still owed him something. That was the final moment anyone saw him alive. Daniel Moore died a hero, his sacrifice written into the whispers of grateful families, but soon forgotten in the glittering towers of wealth. Ethan was too young to remember the night, left only with photographs of a man in uniform and the stories of neighbors who said his father never hesitated when others stood frozen. Raised by his mother alone, he grew up believing the void in their small apartment was simply what life gave to the unlucky. For a while, she worked hard, stitching clothes, waiting tables, carrying both grief and responsibility. Yet when Ethan was still in his teens, the truth of his identity collided with the limits of her acceptance. One evening, with trembling honesty, Ethan told her he was gay. He expected a pause, maybe confusion, maybe even a struggle. Instead, her voice cut colder than any winter storm. "I can't have a son like you." The next morning, his belongings were shoved into a bag and left by the door. That was the day Ethan learned blood ties do not always mean family. From then on, survival became his daily hymn. He scrubbed dishes, mopped floors, carried boxes, any job that offered a meal or a corner to sleep. Music remained the only sanctuary he refused to surrender. The piano at the community center became his companion, its worn keys listening when no one else would. He practiced quietly at night, teaching himself to hear harmony and brokenness. Over the years, he gathered children around him, those who carried the same bruises of rejection. Some were bullied for being too different. Some whispered fears about who they were. Some had nowhere to go after school. Ethan, with no home of his own, gave them a place in music rooms and borrowed halls. He taught them notes, but more than that, he taught them the courage to hold their voices steady when the world told them to stay silent. He carried burdens he never asked for, becoming the shelter he never had. Still, the weight of cruelty never stopped pressing. Madison Whitmore, with her polished smile and sharpened words, saw an easy target in him. She spread whispers that Ethan's dog tag was nothing but a fabricated prop, a scheme to dig gold from her family's fortune. Her voice carried quickly in Houston's polished circles, and soon what was once a chain of honor became painted as a trick. To them, Ethan was not the son of a hero. He was only the gay janitor with a story too convenient to be real. But beneath the noise, the truth waited. The truth of a firefighter who gave his life. The truth of a buster who had been cast aside but still chose to stand. And the truth that dignity, once forged in fire, cannot be stolen by rumor. What Madison never understood was this resilience is not born from privilege. It is born from the ashes of rejection, from the quiet courage of those who continue to rise after being told they don't belong. Ethan had lost his father to the flames and his mother to fear, but he had not lost himself. And that, above all, was the lesson his life-carried family is not defined by those who abandon you. It is defined by the love you create when the world offers none. The night of the Whitmore Group's annual charity gala arrived draped in chandeliers and champagne. The ballroom shimmered with wealth, every corner filled with silk gowns, diamond cuffs, and whispers of deals signed behind closed doors. To the city of Houston, this gala was more than an event. It was a stage where power dressed itself in glitter and reminded everyone who held it. For Ethan Moore, the invitation was not one of honor, but of cruelty. Madison Whitmore made sure of that. She insisted he be there, not as a guest, but as the silent worker in the background, the janitor with a tarnished name, the gay man with a story she had painted as a lie. While cameras flashed across the crimson carpet, Ethan moved trays, polished glasses, and carried the invisible weight of humiliation pressed upon him. Yet his shoulders did not bow. He walked with quiet dignity, eyes steady, his father's dog tag resting under his shirt like a hidden shield. But humiliation was Madison's favorite game, and she did not intend to let the night end without spectacle. As she descended the marble staircase in her silver gown, she called for Ethan. In front of donors, executives, and reporters. She pointed to the carpet rolled across the ballroom floor. Then, with a smirk sharp enough to slice glass, she demanded he kneel. "If you want to stand anywhere near the Whitmores," her voice rang out, "then start by being useful. Be the carpet I walk on." A hush spread through the room. Some turned away in discomfort. Others watched with twisted curiosity. Ethan froze, his body burning with shame, but his face remained lifted. His knees touched the ground, not in surrender, but in defiance of breaking. His eyes stayed firm, staring ahead as if daring the cruelty to crush him completely. The moment stretched painfully long until chaos ripped through the hall. Shouts rang from the far side of the ballroom. A group of men armed with weapons forced their way past security. Panic erupted as glasses shattered and people screamed. Their target was clear. Ryan Whitmore, the youngest heir, stood frozen near the stage as two men lunged toward him. Before anyone could react, Ethan moved. He abandoned the humiliation, leaping from the floor with a force that came not from strength, but from instinct. He hurled himself between Ryan and the attackers, taking the brunt of their assault. Chairs crashed and bodies collided, but Ethan did not falter. He shielded Ryan the way his father once shielded strangers in a burning house. Brandon and Michael watched in stunned silence. It was as if the past had come alive before their eyes. The shadow of Daniel Moore was written in every movement of Ethan's defiance, in the way he protected without hesitation, in the way he put another life before his own. The man who had carried them out of fire had left behind a son who carried the same fire within him. Security swarmed, pulling the attackers away, dragging chaos back into order. The music had died. The gala stripped bare of its glitter, leaving only the raw truth of what had just taken place. Ethan, bruised and shaken, helped Ryan to his feet, his expression calm, his dignity intact despite the gown of humiliation Madison had forced upon him earlier. In that single moment, the Whitmore brothers saw him differently. Not as the janitor Madison mocked, not as the gay man society whispered against, but as the living echo of the man who once saved their lives. The gala had begun as a theater of cruelty, but it ended as a stage for courage. And courage, when shown in the face of humiliation, becomes a mirror forcing others to see what they lack and what they have ignored. Ethan's lesson to the world that night was not spoken aloud, yet it rang louder than any speech. Strength is not found in wealth or reputation. It is found in the refusal to let cruelty define who you are. In the days following the chaos of the gala, the Whitmore family mansion became a place of silence. Brandon Whitmore, the eldest, could not let go of the image of Ethan Moore standing between Ryan and danger, carrying the same selfless defiance their father once described in hushed tones about the firefighter who saved them. Doubt grew into urgency. Brandon hired private investigators demanding the truth that his sister's taunts tried to bury. The files came back heavy with history. From the Houston Fire Department archives, reports described Daniel Moore's final call, the blaze that consumed the Whitmore estate all those years ago, and the detailed account of his sacrifice. Attached to the file was the inventory of recovered items, one dog tag etched with a service number. Brandon held the evidence in his hands, the weight of it undeniable. Every detail aligned with the chain Ethan wore. Michael, ever more contemplative, looked beyond the paperwork. He visited the school quietly, watching Ethan from a distance. There he saw not a man chasing wealth, but one kneeling beside a piano, guiding a trembling child's hands across ivory keys. He listened to the laughter of students who had once been shamed into silence, now lifted by the steady encouragement of Ethan's voice. Michael realized the story was not just about the son of a firefighter. It was about a gay man who chose to be a beacon where others had been shadows. But truth has enemies, and Madison was relentless. Furious that her brothers dared to see Ethan differently, she sharpened her next strike. Gossip spread through tabloids and polished columns, claiming Ethan seduced his way into the Whitmore circle, that his supposed courage was nothing more than calculated manipulation. Photographs were twisted out of context, his name dragged through headlines that painted him as a stain on the family's reputation. The city of Houston divided overnight. One half defended Ethan, praising his strength as an LGBT figure who lived authentically despite the cruelty he faced. They called him an example of courage in a culture still slow to accept difference. The other half echoed Madison, branding him an opportunist riding on the memory of a tragedy. Television anchors debated, talk shows questioned, and social media burned with opinion. Ethan's face, once anonymous in Janitor's clothes, was now everywhere. When a local station offered him an interview, Ethan arrived without pretense. He wore no suit, no carefully prepared script, only the dog tag around his neck and the steady fire in his eyes. The cameras turned on, and for the first time he spoke not as a victim of rumor, but as a son and as a man. I'm gay, I'm poor, but I'm not ashamed. My father died a hero, and I won't let anyone erase that. The studio fell into quiet. The sentence was not loud, yet it carried the weight of every rejection, every night of hunger, every insult endured. For those listening, it was a reminder that dignity does not need permission to exist. The divide in Houston remained, but Ethan's words settled like a stone in still water, rippling far beyond the reach of tabloids. He had not begged for sympathy. He had not fought to prove himself worthy of a family name. He had simply told the truth. And truth, when spoken without fear, has a way of making its own place in the world. In the end, the lesson was clear. Courage is not the absence of cruelty or judgment. It is standing upright while they press against you. Ethan's life was proof that authenticity carries its own strength. And though it may divide, it also reveals who has the courage to stand with you when lies fall away. The boardroom of the Whitmore Group was a cathedral of glass and power. From its high windows, Houston stretched in glittering towers, a city that bowed to the Whitmore name. Around the long, polished tables sat shareholders, executives, and the three brothers whose futures were written in the company's empire. At the head of the room, Madison Whitmore stood like a queen ready to strike. Her words were venom dressed in silk. She called for a formal vote to ban Ethan Moore from any involvement in Whitmore events, to erase his presence from the family's spheres once and for all. He is a stain on our legacy, she declared, her voice sharp enough to cut through the murmur of the board. If we do not sever ties now, we let a janitor with fabricated stories destroy everything this family has built. The air thickened with silence, every eye shifting between the heirs and the man Madison tried to bury. Ethan sat quietly at the edge of the room, dressed simply, his father's dog tag visible against his shirt. He had not come to beg. He had come to stand. Brandon rose first, the file from the Houston Fire Department in his hands. He laid it on the table for all to see. The reports detailed Daniel Moore's sacrifice, the night the Whitmore brothers were pulled from fire by a man who never returned. The service number engraved on the dog tag matched exactly. Brandon's voice did not tremble as he said, "This man's father saved our lives. That is fact. And Ethan has carried that truth with honor, not exploitation." Michael added his own testimony. He spoke of what he had witnessed at the school, of children who found safety and music under Ethan's care. He reminded the board that courage was not measured by wealth or bloodline, but by the willingness to live authentically, even when the world chooses to punish you for it. Ryan, the youngest, broke the final silence. He recalled the moment at the Gala when armed men lunged for him, and how Ethan threw himself forward without hesitation. His words landed heavy. "I saw Daniel Moore in him. I saw the man who saved me as a child, alive again in his son." The shareholders shifted uneasily. Madison tried to fight back, her voice rising with accusations that Ethan had sought only to benefit from their fortune. But before she could press further, Brandon revealed one last piece of evidence. From a law office came the confirmation of a life insurance policy left behind by Daniel Moore nearly 2 decades earlier. It named Ethan as sole beneficiary. The payout had sat untouched for years. The revelation stunned the room. Brandon explained that Ethan had been informed of the policy, but had refused to claim it. Instead, he had signed the rights for the funds to be redirected into a trust supporting the families of fallen firefighters. Ethan had chosen to live with nothing rather than take what could help others survive. The weight of the truth settled like stone. The board fell silent. Even the air seemed to pause. Madison's face drained of power, her accusations collapsing under the undeniable reality that Ethan had never once sought their wealth. Brandon stood tall, his brothers beside him. Together they declared, "Ethan Moore is not just the son of a hero, he is our family. He's our brother." For Madison, it was the end. Stripped of authority, she was cast aside by the very family she tried to control. For Ethan, it was not victory in riches, but in belonging. He walked out of the boardroom with quiet steps. The weight of humiliation finally lifted. In his hand, the dog tag glinted softly. Standing under the open sky, Ethan whispered to the chain, "You didn't just save them. Dad, you saved me. And now I'll carry this legacy with pride." Stories like Ethan's remind us that wealth fades, but integrity endures. Cruelty can shout, but truth always speaks louder. What would you have done if you were in Ethan's place? Walk away or fight to protect your father's name? Follow Heart Stories for more stories of courage, justice, and redemption that will stay with you long after the last word is spoken.